Kahlil Greene stood frozen in front of the class, his quiz taped to the board with a giant red 43% across it. Laughter rippled, but it wasn't the students who put it there. It was his teacher. The same teacher who told him he wasn't calculus material. What Kahlil did next, it didn't just silence the room, it shocked the entire school. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The humid Virginia morning clung to Kahlil Greene's skin as he stepped off the city bus, clutching his worn backpack tighter. He wasn't nervous because of the school's prestige. He had earned his spot here. What he felt was something heavier, harder to name, a silence that followed him since orientation, when he'd first noticed how many eyes paused too long on him, or how his name always got a second glance on roll call. Jefferson Magnet High wasn't just any public school. It was the kind of place politicians pointed to during election season. A model of urban excellence, state-of-the-art labs, AP everything, and a college acceptance rate that read like a private school brochure. Yet, as Kahlil walked past rows of polished glass trophies and smiling donor plaques, he saw no faces that looked like his. In Sen Room 213, AP Calculus was starting. The desks were arranged in tidy rows, the whiteboard already filled with complex derivatives. Mr. Leonard Branson stood at the front, tall, precise, with a pressed shirt and cold eyes that scanned like a barcode scanner. His reputation had preceded him. A stickler, a math purist, and famously unforgiving. Kahlil took a seat in the second row, near the window. He liked the light. It reminded of Saturday mornings spent helping his cousins with fractions and algebra on the stoop of his grandma's house. He remembered how proud his aunt was when he aced the county math competition, how his mom saved for weeks to buy him a used graphing calculator from a pawn shop. As the final bell rang, Mr. Branson picked up a dry erase marker and turned to the class without a greeting. Advanced placement calculus is not a place for guessing. It's not a place for feelings. This class will humble you, and I have no intention of coddling anyone. His eyes swept across the room, briefly pausing on each face, until they stopped at Kahlil. Held. Just a second too long. Branson continued, casually tossing the marker from one hand to another. Some of you think being smart in your last school makes you smart here. It doesn't. This class will eat you alive. Some of you won't survive, and that's okay. The sooner we all accept that, the better. He turned back to the board and underlined a differential equation so violently the marker squeaked. Some of y'all are gonna need to transfer out by Friday, especially those who don't belong. Laughter, nervous, uncertain, then sharp and clear from a group in the back. Kahlil's heart thudded. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared at the equation on the board, pretending to calculate derivatives while swallowing a heat in his throat that had nothing to do with math. He wanted to believe it wasn't about him. But when he glanced to his left and right, he saw only pale faces. He was the only black student in the room. The silence in his chest was deafening. He heard every tick of the classroom clock, every shuffle of feet, every smirk hidden behind a binder. It wasn't what Branson said, it was how everyone heard it. A challenge dressed as instruction, a warning dressed as truth. As the lesson went on, Branson fired problems at the class. He called on students with ease, nodding when they stumbled, encouraging them with dry but consistent patience. When Kahlil raised his hand on question 4, Branson didn't even glance his way. When he raised it again, higher this time, a full 30 seconds passed before Branson responded, not with a name, just a flat next question. A kid in the third row whispered, "Dang, invisible now?" More laughter. By the time the bell rang, Kahlil felt like his desk was on fire. He gathered his things quickly, avoiding eye contact, trying to keep his jaw locked. He didn't want them to see him blink too much, or worse, see his eyes start to water. Outside in the hallway, he found a quiet corner by the stairwell and leaned against the cold cinder block wall. His mind raced. Maybe this was just a bad first impression. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe tomorrow would be different. But even as he tried to rationalize it, a voice echoed in his head. Branson's voice. Especially those who don't belong. He thought about calling his mom, thought about asking if transferring out would really be that bad. Maybe he could take statistics instead, or just focus on his other AP classes. Then he thought about his cousins, the ones who bragged about him being in calculus before he could drive, the ones who said, "Kahlil gonna be the first engineer in the family." No, he wasn't going anywhere. That night, He studied harder than he ever had, went over the chapter twice, watched tutorials, took notes, drew diagrams. He was going to show Mr. Branson, not with words, with work. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Branson had already logged his name into the high-risk category on his private tracking sheet. Had already marked Kahlil as a dropout risk, despite never seeing his work. He had plans, not to teach him, but to prove himself right. And those plans were already in motion. The next morning, Kahlil walked into class confident and prepared, but what Mr. Branson had planned would strike harder than before. The Monday after the pop quiz hung on the whiteboard like a scar. The halls of Jefferson Magnet High felt narrower than ever. The lockers loomed like silent judges, and every step echoed. Kahlil Greene moved through the throng, shoulders hunched, trying to make himself smaller on purpose, as though less of him would make the humiliation fade. The lingering heat of the quiz's red score had become his new shadow. Whispers trailed behind him, swift, poisonous. Someone called out "GED Kahlil" through their smirk. Another piped in with "not AP material," and the words hit him like spit. They found him in the hallway, the phrase ricocheting off the lockers, until every reflective surface seemed to mock him. He didn't answer, couldn't answer. He just sunk slower, absorbing the sting, heart pounding, face tight. He pressed his palm to the cool metal of his locker, trying to steady the tremor in his fingers, trying to steady himself. In class, the buzzing droned on. Kids passed notes with phrases like, "Does calculus now," and "AP dropout." He didn't see who wrote them, didn't look at them. The words floated too close, barrier breaking in their repetition. Every mention of his name felt like glass scraping his skin. Between periods, he overheard them, 3 juniors stuffed around a wall. They mimicked Mr. Branson's voice. "Some of y'all don't belong, especially those who bring the GPA down." Their voices dropped, dramatic, mocking, cruel. They chuckled as if sharing a joke. Kahlil passed them like a phantom, invisible weight dragging at his chest as their laughter followed. When he got to math class that morning, despite studying all weekend, his breath caught again. The seat by the window, where he'd once found comfort under the soft glow of sunlight, now felt like a stage. When he entered, he wanted to crumble back into the hallway shadows, instead of taking his seat. His binders, so organized the day before, sat untouched in his backpack, until his hands folded under the desk, neatly, quietly. He traced the edge of the desk with his fingertips, stayed so still he could feel the heartbeat in his cheek. The bell rang. Mr. Branson swept in, expression neutral. The day's lesson began with a question. Who can explain why we divide by the derivative in the chain rule? Pause. Any takers? A silence tense like taut wire. No takers. Kahlil felt adrenaline rise. Not because he knew the answer, but because he did. Leaning forward, he lifted his hand. It trembled. He bit back the thought of being ignored again. He breathed, steadying it. His palm unclenched. He met Branson's eyes. "Mr. Greene," Branson said, disbelief playing in his tone. "Explain it." His mind had memorized it over the weekend. Step by step he articulated the logic. Outer function, inner function, multiply by derivative. It felt like exhaling after holding his breath for too long. Branson stared calm, unblinking. Then with a tilt of his head replied correct, "Thank you." But there was no praise, no smile, just emptiness. And the class exhaled around him. The hush, a sputter of regained breath that wasn't his. He sat down, chest tight. That moment should have lifted him. Instead, it marked how far ahead he had to climb to be seen. Later in the faculty lounge, echoes of the math class floated. A teacher said, "Kind of a mess, didn't you think?" Another nodded. Some students, not built for the rigor. Kahlil's ears imagined the phrase not as polite concern but as verdict. He paused in the hall outside, phone slick in his hands. He thought about posting something. Maybe just a question about chain rule, or a meme to deflect. Maybe he could laugh too. But his fingers hovered, words too public for the rawness inside him. What had started isolated now felt infinite. Once school was out, he left immediately and headed to the community center, the only place left where his name didn't echo with shame. The hallways smelled of crayons and desperation. Kids squirreled around tables, working on homework under fluorescent lights, and Kahlil's quiet guidance.
"Mr. K, how do I subtract mixed numbers?"
A small voice asked him, tugging at his shirt. He knelt, breathing in that moment of uncomplicated respect and innocence. and gave the easiest instruction he'd ever given. The relief was immediate. This was where he belonged. Away from the mocking riffraff, the unkind scribbles, the laugh. That night he curled up on his bed, tracing the lines of that pop quiz tape out with his fingertips, as if he'd never seen it before. He recalled Branson's indifferent glance, the laughter that seemed to bind itself to his name. He thought of his cousins calling him engineer, thought of his mom's tired smile when he showed her his notes, thought of Saturday tutoring sessions before everything turned. He opened his notebook, redid every problem from that pop quiz, added detailed annotations. Each step slowed, each misstep noted, every correction marked with his resolve. He didn't want to pretend it wasn't there. He wanted to carry it, learn from it. On Sunday he stayed late, redrafting notes, watching video tutorials, mentally running through the formulas until they sounded like breathing. Monday came again. When Kahlil walked into room 213, the fluorescent lights seemed harsher. The air conditioner rattled like a judge's gavel. Behind Branson's lectern, the whiteboard held that red-scored paper again, but now it was taped securely, pinned like a flag, declared as proof. The class windows, so often framed with promise, now framed humiliation. That 43% bold, red, impossible to ignore beckoned at him, shaming any hope he had clung to. Branson began immediately. Today we push forward. His voice carried no empathy. Kahlil's throat closed, tears threatening. Every eye was drawn to the board. Every pair of lips twitched in response. No one looked at him, but every silence echoed in his ears. He stood there frozen. The paper was more than a grade. It was a claim on his fate. And yet as he gazed, something crackled beneath his chest. Not shame but defiance. Clutching his binders, Kahlil took a breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped forward into the drift of judgment, into all of Branson's plans. Humiliated once more, Kahlil made a choice no one expected, one that threatened to disrupt the entire class and turn Branson's plan upside down. The red ink on the whiteboard didn't fade. Day after day, the number stared down at Kahlil like a brand. Taped crookedly in the upper right corner, above the list of homework assignments, it pulsed like a warning. Every time he walked into room 213, the shame returned like muscle memory.
Mr. Branson never acknowledged it. Not once. The quiz wasn't returned. No correction. No comment. Just left there, as if to teach a different kind of lesson.
Each morning Kahlil wondered, would today be the day it came down? And each morning it wasn't. By the second week he'd stopped hoping. In the cafeteria, they whispered louder now. "G.A.D. Kahlil," someone muttered, just loud enough for others to laugh. Another kid, seated 2 tables away, tapped a calculator on his tray and said, "Yo, maybe he needs this more than food." He didn't respond, didn't look up. His tray sat mostly untouched. The food was flavorless, rubbery, but he wasn't hungry, not for anything but dignity. By Wednesday, Kahlil had had enough. He walked to the counselor's office during his free period, rehearsing his words. Maybe if he said it right, someone would understand. Someone would do something. Ms. Rowe welcomed him with a familiar smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "How can I help you, Kahlil?" He sat slowly, gripping his backpack. "I want to talk about calculus." She tilted her head slightly. "Is this about your quiz?" "Yes, and Mr. Branson. I think he's targeting me." Her brow rose just a fraction, barely a reaction. "Targeting?" Kahlil hesitated. "He doesn't call on me. He ignores me. Then he posts my score. No one else's. Just mine. I study. I'm trying. But Kahlil," she interrupted gently. "I've worked with Mr. Branson for 10 years. He treats everyone the same. He's demanding, but fair." He felt a sinking sensation. "The kind where you're falling but no one notices." She continued. "EP Calculus is a rigorous class. Maybe it's just not the right fit for where you are right now. And that's okay. There's always pre-calc or statistics." Kahlil blinked, stunned. "But I've always been good at math. I just need support." "There's no shame in stepping back," she said, too quickly. He stared at her, searching her face for some hint of belief. There was none. When he left, he walked slowly through the hallway, more defeated than before. The bell rang overhead. Doors slammed. Students pushed past, but he moved like he was underwater. That afternoon, as he sat outside alone, tray untouched again, someone approached his table and sat without asking. Maya Lin. He barely knew her, only that she was top of their class, rumored to have already been accepted to Stanford. Early decision. She was everything Mr. Branson respected. Precise. Polished. Untouchable. You're not imagining it, she said. Kahlil looked up. Confused. What? She pulled out her sandwich, unwrapping it slowly. Branson. He's doing it on purpose. He said nothing, just stared. He tried it with me, she added, chewing. Sophomore year. Ignored my answers, graded my work harsher, until I aced the midterm and scored perfect on the final. Why? She shrugged. Because I wasn't what he expected. He likes things neat, predictable. He decides early who's gonna succeed, and who's a distraction. Kahlil's voice was barely audible. But you're the best. Now. But back then I had to claw my way through his biases just to be seen. He swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? Because nobody believed me when it happened. I figured, maybe you'd need someone who does. For the first time in weeks, something in Kahlil's chest eased. From that day on, they started meeting in the library after school. It began quietly, a shared table. No words at first. Then small corrections. Notes passed. Explanations whispered. Maya didn't just tutor. She equipped him. She gave him Branson's patterns, his grading quirks, his favorite problem types. She mapped the landmine. And slowly, Kahlil began to rise. He wasn't perfect. But his answers grew cleaner. His logic, sharper. He studied with a new fire, not just to prove Branson wrong, but to reclaim what had been taken from him. One Thursday afternoon, Kahlil stayed late in room 202. Branson had left early. A rare occurrence. Kahlil told Maya he wanted to study alone. He packed his things slowly, waiting for the last student to leave. Then, as he walked toward the front, something caught his eye. Branson's cabinet. Left slightly ajar. He hesitated. Curiosity edged with fear tugged at him. Inside was a thick red folder labeled Student Performance Index. Kahlil opened it, heart pounding. Spreadsheets. Names. Color-coded lists. Red tags. Green stars. Yellow warnings. His name Kahlil Greene. High-risk projected drop. He flipped through quickly. Other names. Patterns. Most of the red-tagged names, Black or Latino students. All marked with the same cold predictions. His fingers trembled. He pulled out his phone. Snapped pictures, page after page, each one evidence of something deeper than one bad quiz. Just as he turned to close the cabinet, a shadow moved. Footsteps. Someone had just stepped into the doorway behind him. Kahlil spun around, folder still in hand, and locked eyes with someone he never expected to see there. Kahlil froze. The folder trembled slightly in his hand as he turned to face the figure in the doorway. His mind raced through excuses, lies, anything, but his chest tightened when he saw who it was. Maya. She stood there, arms folded, eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but calculation. She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. I figured you'd still be here, she said quietly. I forgot my charger. Kahlil's voice cracked. This wasn't. He held up the folder like a confession. Maya didn't speak for a moment. Then, with a calmness that startled him, she crossed the room and took the folder from his hands. Her eyes scanned the pages quickly, flipping through rows of color-coded names. Jesus, she whispered. She pointed to the title of the spreadsheet, Projected AP Survivability Index Fall Term. Kahlil leaned closer. There were columns for GPA, PSAT score, attendance, and then disturbingly vague tags, disruptive potential, emotional compliance, high-risk safe retention. His name had been highlighted in red. Kahlil Greene, high risk, disruptive potential, recommend transfer if failing by October. No scores, no comments, just that. He turned the page. More names, other students he recognized from the hallway, lunchroom, even two from his tutoring center. Nearly all the red tags beside Black or Latino students. One had a note, quiet but unlikely to keep pace. Another, language barrier, consider ESL downgrade. There were barely any comments next to white students, and none of them were red tags. It's not about performance, Maya said flatly. He decided this before you even walked into class. Kahlil's throat went dry. How is this even allowed? Maya shook her head. It's not. This isn't part of any school system metric I've ever seen. Kahlil took out his phone, snapped clear photos of every page. Maya helped him flatten the papers, adjust the lighting. Their movements were fast, efficient. They weren't just documenting anymore. They were preparing. Maya closed the folder and slid it back exactly where it had been. This changes everything, Kahlil whispered. It's proof. She looked at him, her voice calm but firm. It's a start. That night, Kahlil couldn't sleep. The images of the folder replayed in his mind like a looping newsreel. The red tags, the labels, the quiet approval of failure baked into administrative language. He realized that what happened to him wasn't a fluke. It was systemic. And suddenly, every moment in that classroom clicked into place. Branson had never expected him to succeed. He remembered how Branson never once asked about his study habits, never offered feedback, how he barely concealed the contempt in his voice when Kahlil raised his hand. This wasn't just bias, it was a strategy. By 2 a.m., Kahlil was sitting in his room, laptop open, photos of the documents spread out across a blank Word file. He organized them, added dates, matched them to memories. His quiz score, the taped-up grade, the ignored hand raises. He built a timeline. He added the names of the students marked red. He wasn't just collecting proof. He was building a case. The next morning, Kahlil arrived at school with a different energy. His steps were slower, more deliberate. His eyes scanned everything. The smiles, the silences, the eyes that darted away when he passed. Maya met him at his locker. You okay? He nodded. We need to be smart about this. She handed him a USB drive. I uploaded all the photos there, just in case. In calculus, Branson taught, like nothing had happened. He scrawled vector fields across the board, scribbling arrows and equations as though the room weren't crumbling beneath the surface. But Kahlil didn't look at the board. He watched Branson. Every movement, every glance. During the lesson, Branson walked down the aisle, passing back graded homework. When he reached Kahlil, he paused just slightly, then dropped the paper with a smirk that only lasted a second. Better than last time, he said. The grade? Kahlil stared at it. Not because of the number, but because he knew he was being allowed to fail slower. That's when the intercom crackled. Would Kahlil Greene please report to the main office?
The room went quiet.
Branson didn't flinch. Kahlil stood slowly, adrenaline washing through his chest. Maya glanced at him, subtle but sharp. He walked to the office, trying to keep his mind clear. The air in the hallway felt different. Heavier. He felt like someone watching their own trial unfold in slow motion. When he reached the front desk, the secretary avoided eye contact. You can go right in, she said, her voice flat. Inside, the assistant principal, Miss Dietrich, sat stiffly, her expression unreadable. Have a seat, Mr. Greene.
He obeyed.
We received a report this morning, she began. From Mr. Branson. Kahlil tensed. He says your most recent homework submission was concerning. That several answers were identical to another student's, including specific formatting. Kahlil blinked. Are you saying I cheated? She didn't answer. Instead, she folded her hands. Did Maya Lin help you with this assignment? Kahlil swallowed hard. She reviewed some concepts. That's it. We're not accusing anyone yet, but the formatting and phrasing were close enough to warrant concern. His chest burned. She's been helping me for weeks. We work from the same reference guides. That's not cheating. I understand your frustration, but academic integrity is something we take seriously. His mind reeled. Branson had seen him with Maya, knew they worked together, and now he was turning the one thing helping him stay afloat into another weapon. We'll be reviewing your submission against Maya's, Miss Dietrich continued. Until then, I'd advise you to refrain from further collaboration. The words landed like a slap. Wait, are you saying I can't study with her? Temporarily. It's for everyone's protection. Kahlil stared at her, barely containing the storm rising in his chest. He stood. You're not protecting anyone. You're protecting him. Excuse me. He didn't repeat it. Instead, he left. Out in the hallway, Maya was already waiting. One look at his face, and she knew. He's trying to separate us, he said. She nodded, jaw clenched. He's scared, she replied. Kahlil looked past her, down the empty corridor that led back to room 2. No, he said. He's about to be. Because Kahlil had already sent the photos to someone Branson couldn't silence. And what came next would shake the entire school. Kahlil sat at the kitchen table, his phone face down beside a now cold bowl of oatmeal. The house was silent except for the soft clink of his spoon tapping porcelain and the rhythmic ticking of the clock above the microwave. His mother was getting ready for work, moving quietly through the hallway. The morning air should have felt fresh. He'd done everything right. The night before, he'd filed his notes, organized the photos of Branson's hidden list, and sent a Dropbox link to Maya. He even emailed himself a copy just in case. But something in his chest felt off, like a storm gathering behind a closed door. He arrived at school to whispers, not the usual kind. These weren't mocking jokes or cruel nicknames. This was something else. He saw it in the glances that lasted a second too long, in the way conversations stopped when he walked by. At his locker, a student he didn't know nudged their friend and said under their breath, "That's the one, got caught." Kahlil blinked. Caught? Before he could process it, the intercom buzzed. Kahlil Greene, report to the principal's office immediately. It wasn't a request. As he walked through the halls, each step echoed with the sense of something closing in. When he pushed open the heavy wooden door to the main office, the receptionist looked up with discomfort. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Inside the conference room sat Principal Garvey, stone-faced, with Ms. Dietrich beside him. Branson was there too. Arms crossed, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like a man preparing for cleanup. Garvey gestured to the empty seat. "Sit down, Kahlil." He did. Garvey's voice was calm, controlled and terrifying. "We've reviewed your AP Calculus midterm." Mr. Branson flagged it for concerns of academic dishonesty.
Kahlil's heart dropped. "What?"
Branson leaned forward, his voice dripping with false professionalism. "Several of your answers were not only correct, but identical in structure, language, and even margin notes to Maya Lin's submission. Down to the phrase, 'I didn't copy her,'" Kahlil said, sitting straighter. "We studied the same way, reviewed the same textbook. That's not cheating." Garvey raised a hand. "Mr. Branson also noted you were observed reviewing materials alone in the classroom without permission, possibly accessing answer keys. That folder." The accusation wasn't about the test. This was retaliation. "You think I broke into his cabinet?" Kahlil's voice cracked. "I didn't touch anything." Ms. Dietrich slid a thin packet across the table. It was a printed comparison of his test and Maya's. Bracketed, underlined, highlighted, proof crafted to paint him guilty. Garvey's eyes narrowed. "Unless you can provide a clear explanation for this alignment, we'll need to proceed with disciplinary action." "I have explanations," Kahlil snapped. "And evidence." He reached for his bag, but Branson interrupted. "Principal Garvey," he said, calm but pointed. "Let's remember, we can't let one student derail the integrity of the program. This isn't just about him, it's about every student who plays by the rules." Garvey nodded solemnly. Miss Dietrich leaned forward. "Kahlil, until the investigation is complete, you'll be placed on academic suspension effective immediately. You're not to return to AP classes or communicate with any faculty about this matter." The words hit like a punch to the gut. He sat there stunned. "What about Maya?" he asked. "She'll tell you." Garvey's voice cooled. "Maya has been contacted. We're reviewing her test separately."
"No, listen to me. This isn't a coincidence," Kahlil said, voice rising. "Branson's had it out for me since day one."
Garvey folded his hands. "We've seen no evidence of that." Kahlil shook his head in disbelief. "You haven't looked." Branson stayed silent now, confident. He had done what he set out to do. The damage was already in motion. That afternoon, his mother stormed into the school. They'd called her at work, told her to come in to discuss her son's academic integrity. They didn't tell her they were suspending him. Miss Greene sat across from Principal Garvey, eyes narrowed, lips tight. "My son doesn't cheat," she said. "We're not making assumptions, ma'am. We're simply following protocol," Garvey replied. "So you're suspending him for maybe cheating? Based on what, a teacher who's already humiliated him publicly?" Garvey didn't respond. "I've watched my son cry himself to sleep because of how that man treated him," she added. "I've seen the anxiety, the silence, and now you want to erase him before he has a chance to speak." Branson chimed in, trying to soften the tone. "Mrs. Greene, we all want what's best for Kahlil. But the integrity of the program—" "Stop saying that," she cut in. "You mean your integrity." Branson looked away. Garvey straightened his papers. "The decision stands. He will remain suspended pending further review." At home that evening, the house was too quiet. Kahlil sat on the couch, scrolling through the photos of the hidden folder. Each image felt heavier now, like a truth no one cared to see. His mother paced, phone in hand, muttering to herself. Then she stopped. "Kahlil," she said. "What was that man's name again?" "The teacher?" "Branson. Leonard Branson." She tapped her phone. I've heard that name before. A long time ago. She disappeared into the back of the house, into the storage room she rarely entered. 10 minutes later, she came back with a dusty accordion folder. She flipped through it quickly, bills, letters, report cards, until she pulled out a single-page document folded 3 times. "This," she said, handing it to him. Kahlil opened it. It was a letter, addressed to another school district, written 7 years ago. A formal complaint from another parent. It read, "My son was discouraged from enrolling in AP Mathematics due to the discriminatory behavior of his instructor, Mr. Leonard Branson." Kahlil looked up, stunned. The name of the student, Devin Wright. The parent, Yvonne Wright. The district, Dale County Public Schools. The letter detailed a pattern. Remarks made in class, targeted discouragement, mysteriously lost assignments, and a final incident where Branson had publicly suggested the student wasn't suited for engineering. Same script, same tactics, same man. His mother's voice was low. "Devin's your cousin. On my brother's side." They moved out of Dale County after that. Kahlil sat frozen. He's done this before. This wasn't just personal. It was a pattern. And now Kahlil had proof that Branson's game stretched beyond Jefferson Magnet. But who else knew? And who else had stayed silent? The yellowing letter sat on the kitchen table like a forgotten truth finally resurfaced. Kahlil read every line twice. His eyes scanned slowly, deliberately, as if committing each word to memory. The page trembled faintly in his hand, not from fear but from realization. His mother sat across from him, arms folded, brows furrowed with a mixture of rage and quiet satisfaction. "He's done it before," Kahlil said, almost to himself. "Same tone," Miss Greene replied. "Same dog whistle language. Not suited for advanced placement. Disruptive energy." She shook her head. "That's not educational concern. That's coded racism." The name at the bottom of the letter echoed in Kahlil's mind. Devin Wright. His cousin. A name he barely remembered. Someone who had moved out of the state years ago, under vague adult explanations he wasn't old enough to understand at the time. Now he knew. "Engineering," Kahlil whispered. It said Devin wanted to study engineering. His mom nodded. "He was brilliant at math. Just like you." The complaint was addressed to Dale County School Board, and dated 7 years ago. It accused Miss Leonard Branson of systematically discouraging Devin from remaining in AP Math, deliberately misplacing assignments, altering grades without notification, and verbally suggesting he wasn't built for this kind of rigor. The outcome: Devin dropped the course midway through junior year. The family moved before the spring semester. "What happened to the complaint?" Kahlil asked. "It disappeared," his mom said. "Yvonne, Devin's mom, told me the district resolved it quietly. No apology, no admission, just a meeting and a file that went nowhere." "So they knew," Kahlil said bitterly. "And they let him transfer here anyway." Ms. Greene grabbed her phone. "We're not letting this disappear again." She called her brother. The conversation was tense, short, clipped with decades of built-up frustration. "Devin's still at Howard," she told Kahlil after hanging up. "He's in his senior year, mechanical engineering. I told him what's happening. He wants to talk to you." That evening, Kahlil sat on his bed, laptop open. Devin appeared on the screen, taller than Kahlil remembered, face lean and intelligent, voice measured with the clarity of someone who'd learned to navigate white spaces with surgical precision. "Kahlil," Devin said with a nod. "Didn't think I'd be revisiting this." Kahlil showed him the photos, Branson's folder, the rankings, the red tags. Devin's expression darkened with every image. "That's exactly what he did to me," he said. "Different language, same method. He gaslights black kids out of believing we belong in the room." He leaned forward. "I had a 3.9 GPA. Took honors algebra in 8th grade. But once I got to AP Calc with Branson, he treated me like I'd wandered into the wrong building." Kahlil listened, jaw clenched. "So you dropped?" Devin hesitated. "No. I was pushed out. Branson told my parents he was worried about my stability, that I was resistant to instruction. Then my grades mysteriously dropped. He said I didn't turn in assignments. I know I did. My parents were already tired of fighting the district over other stuff. So they pulled me." He looked into the camera, and I thought I was the only one. "You weren't," Kahlil said. A pause hung between them. Then Devin asked, "What do you want to do?" Kahlil looked over at his mom, who stood by the door listening. "I want to go public," he said. "Expose it." Devin nodded slowly. "Good. But if you do this, be ready. They'll say you're exaggerating. They'll discredit you. Even now, even with receipts. I don't care, Kahlil said. It's not just about me anymore. Devon looked proud quietly. Then I'll back you. I'll share my story too, but only if we go all in. No backdoor meetings. No quiet settlements. Miss Greene stepped into the frame. We don't want silence. We want change. The next day, Kahlil's mom sat at the dining table with her laptop open. She was never one for social media. Mostly used it to scroll pictures of distant relatives and keep up with neighborhood news. But that day, her hands typed with sharp clarity. She wrote a post. Long, raw, unapologetic. It detailed what had happened to Kahlil, the quiz posted on the board, the false cheating accusation, the counselor brushing him off. She included photos of the Student Performance Index folder, red tags circled, and anonymous quotes from the student rankings. Then she included Devon's letter. The final paragraph read, Mr. Branson isn't just a strict teacher. He is a systemic problem allowed to move from district to district while harming black students with impunity. My son is not a statistic. He is not a disruption. He is a young black scholar who has every right to belong. And we will not be silent anymore. She hit post. Within 10 minutes it had been shared 50 times. By noon it crossed 200. A Twitter screenshot appeared within the hour. Then an Instagram repost by a local activist page. Then a tag by a Black Educators Network, with thousands of followers. By nightfall, it had gone viral. The hashtags began to spread. Let Kahlil learn. Expose Branson. Students are not disruption. Direct messages poured in. Former students, parents, even a retired teacher from Dale County who commented, I saw the same things. I should have said something sooner. Kahlil sat in stunned silence as the likes, shares, and messages exploded. He didn't feel victorious. He felt cracked open, vulnerable, exposed, but finally seen. Maya texted, it's working. People are watching now. And beneath the swell of support the tension brewed. Because Branson hadn't said a word. Not yet. But the next morning, when Kahlil arrived at school, the front gate was surrounded, not by students, but by reporters. When Kahlil woke up the next morning, his phone was vibrating so hard it slid off his nightstand. He picked it up groggily. His notifications were flooded. Instagram tags, Twitter mentions, Facebook messages. Overnight, something had cracked wide open. The viral post his mom made had crossed state lines. The hashtag, Let Kahlil learn. It was everywhere. He opened Twitter. One post had 80,000 retweets. A screenshot of his mother's letter to the school board was pinned with the caption, This is what institutional racism looks like in real time. Support Kahlil Greene. Below it, replies poured in. We believe you, young king. I had a teacher like Branson. This is triggering. Tag your local school district. Demand accountability. A thread from a Black STEM graduate had gone viral. This is exactly why Black kids drop out of AP courses. Because we're never allowed to belong. Let Kahlil learn. On Reddit, a user claiming to be a former Jefferson Magnet student confirmed Branson's pattern of quietly pushing out non-white students from AP classes. And then came the media. A reporter from The Root messaged Kahlil's mom, then Teen Vogue, then NBC Washington. They weren't just asking questions. They wanted interviews, receipts, timelines, proof. His mom hesitated at first. Are you ready for this kind of attention? She asked. Kahlil looked her straight in the eye. I've already been humiliated in front of the whole school. I might as well be heard by the world. At school, chaos had a new shape. When Kahlil arrived that morning, a line of news vans was parked along the sidewalk. Reporters huddled outside the front gate, microphones ready. Security stood awkwardly, unsure whether to push them back or pretend it wasn't happening. Students filmed the scene on their phones as they walked in. The tension was electric, like the moment before a protest breaks out. Inside the building, administrators scrambled. Staff meetings were held behind closed doors. Teachers whispered in hallways. And in the middle of it all, Kahlil walked to class like a ghost in his own story. When he entered the calculus room, a hush fell. Branson was absent. A substitute teacher, a flustered young man in his 20s, handed out worksheets without making eye contact. He didn't explain Branson's absence, didn't say his name. The chair at the front of the room sat empty. But its absence was louder than anything Branson could have said. Maya leaned toward Kahlil and whispered, He's not here. Kahlil nodded. He didn't need confirmation. At lunch, students huddled in groups, phones out, Reading the latest updates, a new post had surfaced, this time from a black alum who'd graduated 3 years prior. She detailed how Branson discouraged her from taking the AP Calculus final, telling her a B in pre-calc is better than failing AP. Her post ended. I dropped the class. I dropped my major. I'm still rebuilding. The stories multiplied. So did the outrage. The district was forced to respond. That afternoon, the school issued a vague press statement. It was emailed to parents and posted on Jefferson Magnet's homepage. We are aware of the recent concerns raised by students and families regarding academic equity. Jefferson Magnet High remains committed to supporting all learners. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting an internal review. There was no mention of Branson, no apology, just airbrushed language and empty promises. But it didn't matter. The world was watching now. Kahlil's mom sat at the dining room table, now converted into a command center. Emails flew between lawyers, journalists, and activists. Devon had started a Change.org petition demanding Branson's dismissal and district reform. Within hours, it had over 50,000 signatures. Kahlil sat beside her, reading every name. I didn't know people would care this much, he admitted. They care, his mom said, because this is bigger than you. You gave a name to a problem they've all seen. He nodded, quietly overwhelmed. That evening, the school board released a second statement, shorter, colder. Effective immediately, Mr. Leonard Branson has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an investigation. Kahlil read the sentence 3 times. Administrative leave. That meant he was still getting paid. Still protected. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like containment. Maya texted. They're just trying to wait it out. Hoping the story dies. But it wouldn't. Not this time. Because people were asking questions. National education advocates started amplifying the hashtag. Local leaders called for a town hall. Students began organizing. A senior named Kira announced she was forming a student equity coalition and invited Kahlil to speak at their first meeting. Change was no longer theoretical. It was moving. But while Kahlil sat in that strange twilight of vindication and trauma, Leonard Branson sat in a quiet office in his home. Blinds drawn, phone off, legal pad open. On the notepad, 3 names circled. Kahlil Greene, Maya Len, Devon Wright. He clicked open an old hard drive. Buried within its folders were notes, emails, evaluations from years ago, records he hadn't intended to revisit. Until now, his fingers hovered over a file named Parent Complaint, Dale County. He clicked it. The screen illuminated his face with the pale light of his past catching up. And for the first time in a long time, Branson didn't look like a teacher. He looked like a man cornered. And cornered men don't surrender. They retaliate. The office smelled of furniture polish and stale coffee, but the words floating in the air carried a sharper stench. Compromise. Kahlil sat across from Principal Garvey again. This time without Miss Dietrich or Branson at the table. The curtains were drawn. The door was locked. The entire meeting had been scheduled quietly. No written notice. No calendar event. Garvey folded his hands slowly and looked at Kahlil with an unsettling smile. You've been through a lot, he began, voice calm. And I think we can both agree it's gotten a bit out of hand. Kahlil didn't answer. He sat stiffly, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the principal's face. Garvey continued. We're offering you full reinstatement. Return to all AP courses. A clean record. No notes of suspension. All of it goes away. Kahlil narrowed his eyes. What's the catch? Garvey exhaled. All we ask is a little discretion. A statement from you, public or private, saying the school has addressed your concerns, and you're ready to move forward. No further posts. No more interviews. We put this to rest. Silence. Then Garvey added, you'd also need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Just a formality. Standard. A fire built behind Kahlil's ribs. So you want me to act like none of this happened? He said slowly. Garvey's smile faltered. We're just trying to protect everyone's future, including yours. Kahlil stood, jaw clenched. This isn't just about me, he said. You want me to stay silent while kids next year walk into the same trap? Kahlil, be reasonable. I was reasonable when I raised my hand every day and got ignored. I was reasonable when I was called a dropout risk before I even took a test. Garvey's tone turned cold. If you walk out of here without signing, I can't promise this won't get harder for you. Kahlil stared at him, then turned and walked to the door. Just before he left, he said over his shoulder, It's already been hard, but at least now I know why. Maya was waiting outside the office. Her eyes searched his face as he approached. They tried to buy your silence, didn't they? Maya pulled out her phone. Then it's time. That afternoon, she uploaded the full folder, every page of Branson's Student Performance Index, to an anonymous cloud drive. Then she linked it to a tweet from a burner account. It read, "You want to see how systemic racism in AP courses is actually organized? Look no further. Here's how Jefferson Magnet decided who deserved to learn and who didn't. Let Kahlil learn. Expose Branson." The tweet went nuclear in under an hour. Screenshots were shared on TikTok, stitched into commentary videos by Black educators, DEI experts, and former students from across the country. Activist accounts broke down the coded language used in the rankings, how disruptive potential and emotional compliance were dog whistles, how at risk had nothing to do with performance. Local news returned to Jefferson Magnet the next morning, this time not just for photos, but for hard questions. Why was a teacher allowed to use undocumented evaluations? Why was there no oversight?
Who else knew?
Kahlil, for once, didn't have to speak. The evidence spoke for itself, but the backlash wasn't one-sided. 2 days later, a letter arrived at the Greene household. It was formal, thick paper, a legal watermark embossed into the corner. The return address, Charles Branson, SG, Branson Legal Group, Richmond, VA. Kahlil's mother opened it and read silently. Then she sat down slowly. He's threatening to sue us. Kahlil's stomach twisted. Who? Branson's brother. A lawyer. He's claiming defamation and public endangerment of reputation. Wants us to take down the posts and issue a retraction, or face legal action. Kahlil's jaw dropped. So now they're coming for us? His mother looked up. But her face wasn't afraid. It was steel. They think they're gonna scare us into silence. They have no idea what they just started. Because Miss Greene had already made a phone call to a civil rights lawyer with his own score to settle. The letter from Branson's brother sat unopened on the kitchen counter. Kahlil had seen his mother skim it once and then, without a word, slide it under a thick manila folder labeled "For War." She hadn't said much since, just brewed her tea stronger, and walked heavier. The next morning she pulled into a parking lot behind a corner law office with no sign, just a red door and a brass mailbox that had seen better days. Kahlil followed silently, eyes scanning the building. It didn't look like much, but Miss Greene didn't knock. She walked in like she'd been there before. Inside, the smell of old paper and menthol hung in the air. A receptionist nodded and waved them in. Waiting in the back office was Tyrese Holloway. Mid-30s, sharp fade, wire-rimmed glasses, and a suit that didn't scream money, but dignity. A stack of legal pads sat on one side of his desk, next to a framed photograph him in a Stanford sweatshirt, arm around a younger version of himself holding a high school math trophy. He rose and shook their hands. "I'm glad you called," he said, nodding at Miss Greene. "I've been following the case. Y'all hit a nerve." Kahlil sat down, unsure of what to expect. Tyrese didn't wait long. "I know what it's like," he said plainly. "I was you once. AP Calc. Private prep school. They tried to hold me back junior year, because I didn't engage enough. I finished Stanford at 21 and came back home to burn the whole system down." He leaned forward. "Let me help you do the same." Tyrese worked differently than the lawyers you saw on TV. He didn't talk in riddles or legalese. He pulled out a blank notepad and started with a list. Branson's history. The false cheating accusation. The suspension with no due process. The Student Performance Index folder. The NDA offer from the principal. The district's failure to intervene. "Each of these is a strike," he said. "And together, it's a pattern." He flipped the page. "Now, how public are you willing to go?" Kahlil looked at his mom. She gave a single nod. "All the way," Kahlil said. By the end of the week, Tyrese had filed a formal civil rights complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's office for civil rights. He also sent a cease and desist to Branson's brother, calling their legal threat an intimidation tactic, unworthy of response. Then he did something Kahlil didn't expect. He opened a case to the community. He held a press conference on the steps of Jefferson Magnet High. Kahlil stood beside him, Maya at his left, and a podium in front of a small crowd. Students, parents, teachers, reporters, local organizers with clipboards. Tyrese didn't need theatrics. He just told the truth. This is not about one teacher. This is not about one quiz. This is about the way entire systems are built to quietly decide who gets to succeed and who gets left behind. He lifted a copy of Branson's folder. These are not metrics. These are stereotypes dressed in spreadsheets. Applause. Cameras flashed, but what followed was even more powerful. One by one, students began speaking out. A senior named Isaiah told reporters how he was dropped from AP Physics after 1C, even though a white classmate was allowed to stay with 2 Ds. A Latina sophomore said her essays in AP English were always graded down for tone, even when her grammar was perfect. A girl named Brielle revealed she'd been advised to take the honors track instead, because AP might be overwhelming. Maya spoke next. She kept her voice steady. I only started getting respect when I scored higher than everyone else, and even then, it felt like I had to apologize for it. But it was the final speaker that stunned the crowd. A teacher.
Mrs. Pennington, history, tenured, white.
She stepped up slowly, adjusted the mic, and looked down for a moment before raising her eyes. I've taught here for 18 years. I've seen students like Kahlil pushed out quietly, always with paperwork, always with data. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was just a history teacher, but that was a lie. She paused. It's been happening for years, and it's time we stop pretending we don't know. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kahlil stood frozen. She stepped down without another word. The district scrambled. Emails leaked showing the superintendent had received complaints about Branson before, but had no evidence to act on. The school board scheduled an emergency hearing, and Tyrese wasn't finished. He subpoenaed internal records from the school's faculty server. What they found would change everything. In Branson's digital folder, hidden among lesson plans and grading rubrics, was a document named AP Survival Model, version. It wasn't just a spreadsheet. It was an algorithm, built using district-funded software. It cross-referenced students' standardized test scores, disciplinary records, attendance patterns, and their zip code. And then, it generated recommendations. Some were flagged, not AP ready. Others, low compliance projection. And worst of all, high dropout risk, avoid enrollment. Every flagged name from the folder matched the red tags in Branson's paper files. Tyrese stared at the screen for a long time before saying a word. This ain't just racism, he muttered. This is digital redlining. And it wasn't just Branson's file. The same model had been shared across multiple schools in the district. The Jefferson County Board of Education building had never seen this many cameras. Outside, prototypes waved signs that read AP for all and stop algorithmic bias. On the other side of the crowd stood a small but vocal group of parents and alumni holding placards that read, "Support our teachers, and Branson deserves due process." Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. The boardroom, lined with dark oak paneling and uncomfortable vinyl chairs, had been transformed into an unlikely battleground. At the front sat 7 board members, 6 in suits, 1 in a beige cardigan, with a nameplate that read Nizelle Hargrove. The chairperson, Dr. Louise Martin, sat in the center, gavel poised like a symbol of control she wasn't sure she still had. The front rows were reserved for media. Behind them, the audience, parents, students, faculty, activists, and quiet faces who had once walked through Jefferson Magnet's halls, but never spoken a word. Tyrese Holloway stood near the center, hands clasped, calm. To his right sat Maya Lynn, and beside her, Kahlil Greene, wearing a plain white shirt and navy blazer, his hands trembling slightly beneath the table. The gavel banged once. "This hearing is now in session," Dr. Martin announced. "We are here to evaluate the conduct and professional practices of Mr. Leonard Branson, and to determine the future use of evaluative models at Jefferson Magnet and affiliated schools." No one spoke. Then Tyrese stood. "I'd like to begin by calling Kahlil Greene to testify." All eyes turned to the 17-year-old as he rose and walked to the mic. Kahlil took a slow breath, then another. Then, in the kind of silence that makes or breaks someone, he spoke. "I didn't come here to ruin anyone's career," he began. "I came here because I was told I didn't belong before I ever proved I did." He looked at the board directly. "I raised my hand in AP Calculus and got ignored. I turned in assignments and had my grade posted on a wall. I was labeled a high risk before I ever took a quiz." He held up a printed copy of the red tag list. "This isn't about performance. It's about perception. It's about who you believe deserves a shot and who you quietly nudge out the door." His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't waver. "This system told me I was the problem. But all I ever did was show up. He stepped back. Maya took his place. I was the exception, she said. I got the praise. I got the benefit of the doubt. And I thought it was because I worked harder. She paused. But now I realize it was because the system saw me as the right kind of minority. Quiet. Palatable. Safe. Branson didn't believe in merit. He believed in molds. A ripple moved through the audience. Some nodded. Others shook their heads.
Then came Tyrese.
He approached with a stack of charts, spreadsheets, and a whiteboard on wheels. Let's talk numbers, he began. The algorithm used to rank students was not peer-reviewed. It wasn't vetted by the district, and it penalized students based on zip codes, disciplinary history, which we already know is racially biased, and even language use in essays. He tapped the board. This is digital redlining. He flipped to a second chart. Now here's what happens when you apply Branson's algorithm to a racially blind dataset. He paused. The model still flags black students disproportionately. Why? He answered his own question. Because the formula was built on flawed assumptions and funded by this very district. The room erupted. Some gasped. Others shouted. A white father stood up, angry. My son's in Branson's class. He's the best teacher there. He sets a high bar, and you want to punish him for it. A black mother rose next. My daughter dropped AP Bio after one term because no one believed she could do the labs. Branson didn't teach her, but the culture he helped create, it broke her. Voices clashed. The board banged the gavel again. Order. Please. Order. The final surprise came when the district's own IT director was called to testify, subpoenaed by Tyrese. She reluctantly admitted the ranking model was uploaded on the shared faculty server under Branson's account. It was accessible to other staff, she said, but no one else used it formally. He pushed it. Silent. Then the board called for a closed-door deliberation. 30 minutes later they returned. Dr. Martin took a long breath and looked down the table. We have a split vote, she said. 3 members voted to fire Branson and ban ranking algorithms. 3 voted to issue a formal reprimand, but allow him to return after a period of probation. The final vote came down to Ms. Hargrove, a retired teacher, once Branson's mentor. She looked weary, not from the hearing, but from years of watching the system from within. I taught Leonard Branson when he was fresh out of grad school, she began. He was brilliant, passionate, but somewhere along the way he started believing that math was only for the neat, the orderly, the obedient. She looked at Kahlil, and that's not what education is. She turned to the board chair. My vote is to remove Mr. Branson from the classroom. Permanently. But before the gavel could fall, a lawyer in the back stood up and said, my client has just filed an injunction to stop this vote. The tension in the boardroom had turned electric. The gavel was suspended mid-air, frozen by the voice that cut through the air like a blade. My client has filed an injunction to stop this vote. All heads turned toward the back of the room. Standing with calm defiance was Charles Branson. Leonard Branson's older brother, a man known in legal circles for his stone-cold demeanor and aggressive litigation tactics. He held a leather-bound folder in one hand, his briefcase in the other, wearing the kind of 3-piece suit that screamed control. Dr. Martin lowered her gavel. Stunned. An injunction? Charles nodded. Filed with the district court at 8 a.m. this morning. We were anticipating the outcome of this vote. Until this matter is reviewed legally, any termination proceedings against Mr. Branson are null and void. The boardroom erupted. Outrage, confusion, disbelief. One parent shouted, this isn't a trial, this is a cover-up. Another yelled, he's hiding behind lawyers. Therese Holloway didn't flinch. He stepped forward, papers in hand. That injunction won't hold, he said evenly. Because you filed it based on protected employment law. But Mr. Branson's behavior violated civil rights statutes, which supersede contract protections. Charles smiled coolly. Let's let the courts decide that. But the interruption didn't matter. Because Ms. Hargrove stood again. She looked at the chaos, the flash of cameras, the legal wrangling, and her expression didn't change. Even if the vote is paused, she said slowly, I still need to say it. She turned back to the board. I've sat on this board for 9 years. I've watched decisions made in back rooms with closed doors and careful words. But I've never seen a student, any student, fight this hard for their right to belong. She paused, looking at Kahlil. I know what Leonard used to be, but who he became, that is not someone I will continue to protect. Her voice wavered, just slightly. I vote to terminate his position. Permanently. Then she added, quietly, and I resign. Effective immediately. She took off her name badge, set it on the table, and walked out, leaving behind a stunned silence thicker than the air. The vote, though frozen, had been made. And the fallout was immediate. The next morning, the Jefferson County School District launched a full internal investigation. Not just into Branson, but into every educator who had accessed, contributed to, or utilized the so-called AP survival model. Within a week, 6 other teachers were placed on administrative leave. 3 resigned quietly. The district IT department confirmed that the ranking algorithm had been shared with over a dozen staff across multiple campuses. Branson's past evaluations were unsealed. Hidden beneath years of glowing performance reviews were buried notations of parent complaints and cultural insensitivity. At least 2 formal reports had been filed in Dale County, never escalated. One was from Devon Wright's mother, the same letter Kahlil's mom had pulled from the back of a filing cabinet, now resurfaced as evidence. The final blow came when the State Board of Education weighed in. After reviewing Tyrese's complaint, the board ruled that Branson had repeatedly and egregiously violated ethical standards of pedagogy by fostering a discriminatory classroom environment through unapproved evaluative measures. The verdict: Leonard Branson was permanently barred from teaching in the state of Virginia. His license was revoked. His career done.
No appeal. No courtroom redemption.
Just a final, quiet removal from the very system he had once weaponized. Kahlil returned to school 2 weeks later. There was no parade, no cheers. Just nods from classmates who had watched from the sidelines. A pat on the back from a younger student he didn't know. A post-it on his locker that read, "Glad you're back." But when he stepped back into room 2213, it felt different. The fluorescent lights still buzzed. The chairs still squeaked. But the air wasn't hostile anymore. The substitutes smiled nervously. "We're reviewing optimization today. Ready to rejoin?" Kahlil nodded, sitting in his usual spot by the window. It felt poetic somehow, like starting again in the same seat where everything fell apart. Maya passed him a fresh packet of notes. "Glad you're here," she said. "Yeah," Kahlil replied. "Me too." But his return wasn't the end. Because now, he had to prove something else. A week later, Tyrese handed him a manila envelope. Inside was a crisp formal letter, on letterhead from the Virginia Mathematics League. Kahlil Greene had been invited to represent Jefferson Magnet in the upcoming statewide math bowl. It was the most elite math competition in the region, reserved for the best of the best. He was the only black student invited. The only returning student from a school still under investigation. He read the date on the form. The competition was in 3 weeks. Maya looked over his shoulder and whispered, "This is it, isn't it?" He nodded, a flicker of nerves in his chest. "It's the hardest test of my life." And across town, a new teacher had just been hired to replace Branson. Someone with a name Kahlil hadn't heard in years, but would never forget. The Virginia State Math Bowl had always been prestigious, but this year it felt like a proving ground, not just for math prodigies, but for public opinion, for equity, and for the question everyone had been too afraid to ask outright. Does Kahlil Greene really belong here? The Jefferson Magnet High School bus had pulled into the parking lot that morning to the flash of local news cameras and the quiet buzz of whispered expectations. Students from rival schools watched as Kahlil stepped down, flanked by Maya Len and Tyrese Holloway. He wore no school jacket, no brand logos, just a plain navy blazer and black slacks. There was something symbolic about it. Kahlil didn't need decoration. He was walking into this test as he was raw, challenged and defiant. The auditorium was a hive of tension. Banners from Virginia's top high schools fluttered from the high walls. Metal chairs creaked under the weight of faculty. Parents and students leaning forward with anticipation. Judges from MIT, UVA, and the State Department of Education sat in the front row. Kahlil had made it to the final round. Just him. The moderator stood center stage. "This round," he said, voice booming across the loudspeakers, "will be a single problem. 1 contestant. 5 minutes. No calculators. No notes." The crowd leaned in. "Only 1 student in the last decade has solved this problem within the time limit. We'll see today if lightning strikes twice." Lights dimmed. The screen behind the moderator flickered. The equation appeared in white against a dark blue backdrop. XY coro sin xy dx dy, within a rotated coordinate system, with bounds defined by nested parametrics. The gasp from the audience was audible. Teachers muttered. Maya's jaw tightened. Kahlil, the moderator said, your time starts now. He didn't move for the first 5 seconds. Instead, he closed his eyes. Around him, the auditorium melted away. No judges, no cameras, no history, just memory. Saturday mornings on his grandmother's porch. Scribbled division problems on cardboard cereal boxes. Teaching his cousin Leland how to factor trinomials using pocket change and a busted calculator. Math had never been about prestige. It was survival. It was escape. It was joy. He stepped to the whiteboard. No wasted motion. It began with the bounds. Rotated axes meant applying a Jacobian transformation. He mapped the rotated region to a polar grid, redrawing the limits of integration. The room watched in real time as the chaos of a multivariable nightmare became something legible. Then he approached the inner integral. He factored out xy tat, an isolated sin, xy, recognizing that the function could be rewritten using a series expansion, shaving precious seconds from computation. By minute 2, the judges had leaned forward. By minute 3, whispers echoed through the rows. He's not skipping steps. No substitutions. He's solving it, clean. Minute 4, he boxed the first answer. Moved to the outer integral. Another quick substitution. Recognition of symmetry across the y-axis. Final simplification. He slowed for 1 beat, then wrote the final boxed solution. For sin. 1, 3. And he capped the marker. Total time 4 minutes. 38 A silence fell across the room like a dropped curtain. He stepped back, hands by his sides. The head judge, an older professor from MIT, walked to the board slowly. He squinted at each step. No words, just reading. Then, is this real? One judge whispered. Another leaned in. That's the same approach used by the 2011 national finalist, but cleaner. Someone muttered. Then he turned to the crowd. Answer verified. He raised his voice. Correct. The auditorium erupted. A sound wall of clapping, whooping, and awe. Students leapt to their feet. Faculty shook heads in disbelief. Phones were out. Filming, posting, tagging. Math Bowl legend trended within minutes. But for Kahlil, everything slowed down. He saw Maya stand first. She ran to the stage. The hug they shared was more than relief. It was a release. I told you, she whispered. You were always the answer. His mother cried openly from the 3rd row. Devon cheered so loudly, it echoed. Therese stood off stage, eyes glassy. He didn't clap. He just nodded. The moderator returned to the mic. For the first time in over a decade, he said a contestant has completed the championship problem under the 5-minute mark with a perfect score. He held up a certificate. We hereby award Kahlil Greene the Virginia State Math Bowl Championship, a $50,000 scholarship, and nomination to the National STEM Assembly. More applause. Somewhere in the 3rd row, a girl whispered, he just erased Branson's legacy with 1 answer. But not everyone clapped. At the very back, a man in a brown tweed jacket and thin-rimmed glasses stood slowly. No expression, no reaction. He turned and walked out of the auditorium, without a word. Kahlil noticed. Who's that? He asked Maya. I think... She paused. He just joined Jefferson's faculty. Quiet hire. Math department. Khalil's eyes narrowed. Why would he leave before the awards? She hesitated. Word is, he used to work with Branson, years ago, at Dale County. Applause thundered on. But something cold moved through Kahlil. Not fear, not doubt. They regroup. That night, Kahlil lay in bed, exhausted. His phone buzzed nonstop. Emails, DMs, mentions. Harvard STEM team, reaching out, amazing performance. Columbia Engineering admissions. Let's talk. We'd love to discuss a scholarship interview. Yale Math Society. He stared at them all. One stood out. Subject from the desk of Dr. Eloise Martin, Superintendent. Body. We'd like to speak about a new district-wide math initiative, with you helping lead it. But just beneath it, a Gmail notification. From Leonard Branson. And the subject line simply read, We're not finished. The auditorium trembled with noise. The moment the head judge confirmed Kahlil's answer as correct, the crowd didn't simply clap. They erupted. It wasn't polite applause or casual appreciation. It was a roar, an eruption of disbelief, celebration, and vindication, all rolled into one. The scoreboard lit up with Kahlil's name in bold. Jefferson Magnet, first place. Below it, the equation he'd solved flickered one last time before fading to a banner. State champion. The announcer tried to regain control. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a proper moment of congratulations. But no one was listening. Maya was the first to reach the stage. She sprinted up the steps with zero hesitation and wrapped Kahlil in a hug that was fierce, proud, and deeply earned. "You did it," she whispered. "They can never say you don't belong again." Kahlil blinked hard. His arms wrapped around her slowly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to feel this yet. "It doesn't even feel real." His mother followed seconds later. Tears had already soaked into her blouse, and she didn't care. She kissed his forehead and gripped his hand like a lifeline. "You gave them no excuses. None. I'm so proud of you." Tyrese Holloway stood off stage, watching. No phone in hand, no social media, just eyes filled with history. He had watched this system bury boys like Kahlil 100 times. Today, it lost. Back at the judges' table, the panel reviewed the full problem-solving footage. One replay, then another, then a slow-motion analysis of how Kahlil broke the integral apart. He didn't just solve it, one judge said. He saw the problem for what it really was. That substitution mid-step. That's not textbook. That's instinct. The moderator stepped back to the podium and raised his voice over the applause. "For the first time in over a decade," he announced, "a contestant has solved the final math bowl problem under the time limit, with no computational error and no skipped logic." He held up a gold-framed certificate. "We award Kahlil Greene the State Math Bowl Championship, a $50,000 scholarship, and the nomination to represent Virginia at the National STEM Assembly." Kahlil accepted it with shaking hands. Cameras snapped. Microphones crowded. But through the flashes he noticed something unsettling. Near the exit doors of the auditorium, a man stood alone. Tweed jacket, wire-rimmed glasses, quiet posture. He hadn't clapped, hadn't moved during the entire round. But now, with the applause reaching its peak, he stepped back and left. No acknowledgement. No reaction. Just a silent walk away. Kahlil nudged Maya. "Do you see that guy?" She followed his gaze. "Brown jacket?" "Yeah. Who is that?" She frowned. "He's new. I saw him in the staff photo board at Jefferson. Math department. Joined last week." "Then why walk out now?" Maya hesitated. "I heard something from a senior. He used to teach with Branson. Same school. Dale County." Kahlil's expression hardened. The celebration suddenly felt thinner. The cheers around him dulled. Because he knew. Removing one man didn't kill the system. It just taught it how to hide better. Later that night, the Greene household was overflowing with energy. Uncles, cousins, neighbors, they packed the house with food. Stories, laughter, plates of fried catfish, mac and cheese, sweet tea, and peach cobbler covered every surface. "You did all that math, now come do these dishes," one auntie joked, elbowing Kahlil playfully. He laughed, but his mind was elsewhere. At the core of all the celebration was a strange stillness. He slipped away to his room, shut the door, sat on his bed. The silence hit him harder than the noise. He picked up his phone. The screen was filled with notifications, emails from top universities, tweets, Instagram tags, news coverage. He scrolled slowly. Harvard STEM team. Let's discuss your future. Columbia Engineering. Incredible performance. Yale Applied Math Dept. Invitation pending. He paused, scrolled further. Then he saw one that stopped his breath. From the desk of Dr. Eloise Martin, Superintendent. He tapped it open. "Kahlil, we've watched your journey with awe. The district would like to speak with you about designing a student-led math mentorship program for underserved schools. You'd be the first student advisor in Jefferson County history. Let us know if you're open to it." It was surreal. The same system that once tried to silence him now wanted to elevate his voice. He wasn't sure how to feel about that yet. But just as he started to draft a reply, another notification slid across the screen. From Leonard.Branson. No subject. Kahlil's heart skipped. He stared at it. For a long time, he didn't open it. He just let it sit there, unread, like a ghost. Then finally, curiosity won. He tapped it open, and what he saw wasn't a threat. It was something far stranger. The emails didn't stop. For 3 straight weeks, Kahlil's inbox read like a who's who of academic royalty. Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia. each message more glowing than the last. We would be honored to have you join our class of future innovators. You embody the resilience, intellect, and excellence we seek in our scholars. Full ride, research funding, faculty mentorship, you name it, we'll make it happen. Each one felt like a lifeline, a validation of everything he had fought through. But also, a reminder that these doors had only swung open after he'd forced them to look. After he'd gone viral. After he'd risked everything. One evening his mother walked into his room, holding a thick folder in one hand and a mug of tea in the other. Your grandma used to say, all that glitters still might be glass, she said. Kahlil looked up from his laptop. What if it's real though? She handed him the folder. It was from Howard University. No fanfare, no poetic metaphors, just a clean acceptance letter, a scholarship offer, and a handwritten note at the bottom.
We know you don't need us to make you great, but we'd be proud to be part of your journey anyway.
That one hit different. The debate began even before he made a decision. Someone leaked his shortlist. Harvard and MIT were at the top. Howard was listed too. Third, social media exploded. Comment sections were full of speculation. If he picks Howard, it'll be the dumbest move ever. He's Ivy League material. I hope he goes where he's appreciated, not tolerated. Don't waste your talent on symbolism. Go where the labs are. Kahlil said nothing. Until graduation day, the auditorium was packed. It had been 1 year since the Math Bowl win, 1 year since the investigation, 1 year since Branson's quiet removal, and the district's public reckoning. Kahlil had been asked to give the valedictorian speech, the speech everyone was waiting for. He wore no cap, just that same plain blazer, and the medal around his neck. He stepped to the mic, cleared his throat. I spent a lot of this year trying to prove I deserved to be here, he began. And in doing that I forgot I was never the problem. He paused. Some people think opportunity is about who's smartest. But it's often about who's believed first. More silence. I've been asked which school I'm choosing. So I'll say it here. The audience leaned in. I'm choosing Howard University. A beat. Then gasps. Then applause. Loud. Unapologetic. Surprised. Because I want to learn in a place where I'm not a risk factor. Where the default isn't doubt. Where I don't have to outperform stereotypes to be seen as worthy. Somewhere in the back, Maya stood up and clapped the loudest. And that moment, it went viral too. Howard over Harvard trended for days. Cable news picked it up. Op-eds were written. Podcasts dissected it. Was it foolish? Was it brave? Was it the beginning of something bigger? Kahlil stayed out of the arguments. He got to work. By the fall, he had started his freshman year in D.C. He walked Howard's red brick campus not like a student chasing legacy, but like someone building one. He majored in applied mathematics with a minor in community education. But it was the afternoons that defined him most. 3 days a week, he hosted a program called Equity Equation, a math mentorship collective for Black high schoolers across the city. He didn't just tutor. He listened. He showed them how to code calculators on old laptops, how to dissect logic puzzles, how to walk into rooms knowing you didn't owe anyone an apology for being there. He gave them what he never got, until it was almost too late. One day, a 9th grader named Sean stayed after to ask, "Did you ever think about quitting?" Kahlil smiled. "Every week."
What stopped you?
Kahlil thought for a moment, then said, "I realized the people trying to stop me didn't even know how to do what I could. So why should they be the ones to decide if I belonged?" Sean grinned. "That's cold." Kahlil laughed. "It's math." His work didn't go unnoticed. Howard nominated him for a National Community Impact Award. The Department of Education reached out about scaling his program. Local schools started adapting his model. And then, a letter came. Not an email, a real letter, from Jefferson Magnet. It was from the new principal, Kahlil.
We'd like to invite you back to speak. 1 year to the day since your win. We think the students need to hear from you.
He didn't say yes immediately, but he read the letter 3 times. And on the 4th read he smiled. He agreed, but only if the speech would be in the same room where he once scored a 43%. The auditorium looked smaller now. The rows of plastic chairs, the creaky podium, the same pale blue curtains that framed the stage like faded velvet. Kahlil stood behind the curtain, gripping a small note card in one hand, though he had long since memorized his speech. The last time he was in this room, he wasn't speaking. He was shrinking. Shrinking under the weight of judgment, of expectation, of the silent math of who gets to belong and who doesn't. Now, it was packed. Every seat was filled with students, teachers, administrators, even community leaders. Phones were out. Reporters sat in the back rows. The district superintendent was present, and Maya sat in the front row, arms crossed, proud, but tucked near the back. By the side entrance where no cameras pointed, stood Mr. Rodney, the janitor, the one who always gave Kahlil a knowing nod when he stayed late in the classroom. The one who handed him a paper towel the day Branson taped his quiz to the whiteboard. The one who once told him, "Some folks see dirt. Others see soil. Soil's where things grow, son. You're not here by accident." Kahlil hadn't forgotten. He took a breath and walked on stage. The room hushed. He adjusted the mic, looked out at the rows of students, some who had laughed once, some who had been silent, all now listening. "Last time I stood in this school," he began, "I was told I wasn't calculus material." He let the words settle. No one said it directly. They never do. It came in looks, in expectations, in labels, in assumptions. A pause. I don't hate anyone for it, but I also won't pretend it didn't happen. A few teachers exchanged glances. I thought I had to be perfect to earn my seat. I thought if I solved every problem, they'd stop questioning my presence. But the truth is, the system was never built to expect me here in the first place. Whispers rippled. Kahlil continued. But here's what they didn't factor in. My grandma's prayers, my mother's sacrifices, my community's resilience, and my own decision not to shrink. He smiled slightly. I've been asked to speak about success, but I want to talk about redefinition. He walked slowly across the stage. Redefinition means choosing what we value. It means asking, why is being first something to celebrate, when it really means no one else was allowed in? Maya leaned forward. Redefinition means not measuring intelligence by who speaks the fastest or solves the fastest, but by who learns, who teaches, who uplifts. He stopped at center stage, then picked up a small whiteboard from behind the podium. He uncapped a marker and wrote the same problem Branson mocked him over on his first day. Zon 3 dicor, 2x. Laughter stirred in the front row, nostalgia mixed with recognition. I was told this was too advanced for me, Kahlil said. He turned to the board and solved it in under 5 seconds. X-crow, he turned back. Didn't smile. Didn't gloat. I don't say this to prove anything. I say this because that moment never defined me. The response did. He set the marker down and looked toward the back. He found Mr. Rodney's eyes. The older man nodded slowly, arms folded, smiling in quiet pride. Kahlil continued. I now mentor students who feel the way I once did. Isolated, underestimated but never unintelligent. He closed the speech simply. If I'm not calculus material, then maybe it's time we change what material looks like.
The room exploded in applause.
But Kahlil didn't look for the standing ovation. He only looked toward the back, where the janitor who always believed in him stood tall and clapped first. If I'm not calculus material, then maybe it's time we change what material looks like. No student should ever be told they don't belong before they're even given a chance. If Kahlil's fight for dignity moved you, type yes if you believe in justice, and subscribe if his story broke your heart.